If anyone had told me that my arrogant husband's fiercest rival would one day be the one to save me and eventually become the love of my life, I would have laughed them out of the room. The boardroom was her domain, and the 20-foot mahogany table her throne. Valeria's presence wasn't just noticed. It was felt, an icy weight that seemed to settle over everyone the moment she entered. She was the embodiment of controlled severity, a portrait rendered in shades of black and white, every detail sharp enough to cut. A razor-sharp black blazer, hair the color of dark espresso pulled into an impossibly sleek chignon. Eyes the shade of winter frost that missed nothing and promised less. Her voice, a low, precise contralto, didn't need to rise to command absolute silence. It simply cut clean and surgical through pretense and poor performance alike. She was Valeria Knox, CEO of Vidian Industries, and she had carved her empire from ambition and ice. She was feared, respected, and often despised, a state of affairs she not only accepted but cultivated. Emotion was a variable she had long since eliminated from her corporate equations. It was messy, inefficient, and ultimately costly. Her only true variable, her only worthy adversary, was Gavin Mercer. He was the charming snake oil salesman CEO of Ethereum Corp., her primary competitor. Where she was ice, he was swamy fire. Where she won through ruthless strategy, he won through backroom deals and a disarming smile that made weaker-willed investors forget to read the fine print. She despised him with a purity that was almost refreshing. It was a clean, uncomplicated hatred. And then there was her. Valeria first noticed Lila Hart at the Vidian annual charity gala. Valeria herself was holding court near the ice sculpture, dissecting a junior partner's market analysis with quiet, devastating accuracy when a ripple of softer laughter cut through the corporate murmur. Her frosty gaze flickered toward the sound. And there she was. Lila was a sunbeam in a room of gray flannel, dressed in a gown of pale gold silk that seemed to drink the light and radiate it back out. She was on Gavin's arm, her smile polite and polished. But Valeria, a master of reading. People saw the difference instantly. Gavin's smile was a weapon, a transaction. Lila's was genuine. It reached her eyes, which were the color of summer sky, and it held a warmth that seemed to soften the edges of everyone she spoke to. She listened with a quiet intensity that made the person speaking feel like the most important soul in the room. Valeria's first thought was clinical, almost dismissive, too soft, a liability, but she couldn't look away. She watched the effortless way Lila navigated the shark tank, her grace untainted by the cynicism that polluted the air. She was intelligent. Valeria could see it in the sharp, thoughtful nods, the occasional quiet question that demonstrated a grasp of complex topics far beyond the typical arm candy's purview. She wasn't just beautiful, she was brilliant. Her mind, a keen, polished instrument she wielded with a gentle humility that was utterly foreign to Valeria's world. A strange, unfamiliar sensation coiled in Valeria's gut. It wasn't contempt, it was something far more dangerous, a flicker of admiration. She saw them again months later at a tech summit. Gavin was on stage spewing buzzwords and hollow promises, and the camera, as if drawn by a magnetic force, kept panning to Lila in the front row. She was the picture of supportive devotion, her gaze fixed on him. But Valeria, watching from her private box, saw the minute tightening around Lila's eyes, the almost imperceptible flinch when Gavin dramatically overstated a quarterly projection. She knows, Valeria realized with a jolt. She knows he's full of it, and she's sitting there playing her part. The admiration curdled into something sharper, more protective. What a waste of such radiance. What a crime to chain such a luminous mind to a man whose only true talent was self-aggrandizement. The final encounter was at an art gallery opening Gavin was sponsoring. Valeria attended out of obligation, a black panther moving through a flock of peacocks. She found herself standing before a tumultuous abstract painting. Its chaotic swirls of dark color suddenly slashed through with a single shocking streak of gold leaf. It's like hope, isn't it? A soft, melodic voice said beside her. The artist said, it's about the one beautiful true thing that persists through The chaos, Valeria turned. It was Lila alone for a moment, a glass of champagne held loosely in her hand, her gaze fixed on the painting. Or it's the chaos consuming the beauty, Valeria replied, her voice cooler than she intended. Lila lifted that sky-blue stare to her, and for a heartbeat Valeria felt oddly laid bare, as if those eyes could look past blazer and boardroom polish to the calculating engine beneath. A small, knowing smile curved Lila's mouth. You must be... Valeria nods. Gavin mentions you often. I'm sure he does, Valeria replied dryly. He says you're the most ruthless negotiator he's ever met. Lila sipped her champagne, her gaze never leaving Valeria's. I think he's secretly afraid of. You. The candor was disarming. And you? Valeria asked, a challenge threading her tone. Are you afraid? Lila waited, head angled. No, she said at last, and her voice was genuine. I find efficiency fascinating. There's a kind of beauty in it, a purity. The word hit Valeria with unexpected force. No one had ever called her ruthless. Efficiency beautiful before. They called it cold, calculating, brutal, never beautiful. It felt like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known existed. Before she could answer, Gavin descended, oozing counterfeit charm, and whisked Lila away with a proprietary palm at the small of her back. Lila cast one last look over her shoulder at Valeria, not fearful, not dismissive, simply curious. Valeria remained rooted before the painting, chaotic dark eddies, that single, persistent vein of gold. The unfamiliar pressure in her chest spread, cinching her ribs. It was more than admiration now. It was a profound, disquieting sense of WRONGNE's stot it. Was the sure knowledge that a masterpiece hung in the wrong gallery, cheered by the wrong crowd. It was, though she'd never have said it aloud, a hunger to be the one who truly understood the masterpiece, to be the curator worthy of its display. She left the gallery that night with Lila's intelligent eyes and that seam of gold leaf burned into her mind. The ice around her heart hadn't thawed, but a fault line had formed, and through it shone a light she couldn't and perhaps didn't wish to extinguish. Part 2, The Betrayal Uncovered. The inquiry into Gavin Mercer wasn't born of petty rivalry. It was strategic necessity. Valeria Knox lived by a simple rule: know everything. For months, Ethereum Corp had been winning contracts with a suspicious, almost prescient edge. They were undercutting Vidian's bids by margins that were either financially suicidal or suggested Gavin had access he shouldn't, industrial espionage. It was the only hypothesis that fit the data. Valeria's office was a monument to controlled power. Floor-to-ceiling glass offered a sweeping cityscape she commanded. The panes so clean, they felt like nothing stood between her and the skyline. The air thrummed with the hush of expensive systems that kept her world running. Here she was architect of reality, and every variable was hers to move. She pressed a discreet button on her desk. Send him in. The man who entered was a ghost in a well-cut suit. Colin Price, Price Consolidated Security, didn't look like a private investigator. He looked like a mid-level actuary, which was exactly why he was the best. He was blandness personified, a man who could vanish in a crowd of two. He set a plain black encrypted drive on her desk. A comprehensive overview of Mr. Mercer's recent business dealings. As requested, he said, his voice a neutral monotone. Valeria lifted the drive as if it might be venomous. And your instincts were right. The pattern points to a data leak, not superior strategy. The source appears to be a junior analyst in your logistics division. We've compiled proof. He's being well compensated for his disloyalty. A cold, satisfied smile touched Valeria's mouth. This was what she paid for clean, actionable intelligence. Gavin was a thief. She would destroy the analyst, then use the trail to publicly eviscerate Gavin at the next quarterly shareholder meeting and scoop Ethereum's crippled assets for pennies on the dollar. A perfect, elegant checkmate. However, Price continued, his tone not shifting a single decibel. During our digital surveillance, we identified a secondary behavioral pattern. It falls outside the original scope, but given its potential reputational impact, I deemed it pertinent to include. It's in the supplementary folder. Valeria's brow lifted a fraction of a millimeter. Reputational impact was corporate shorthand for scandal. Perhaps embezzlement or something even less savory. A weapon is a weapon, whatever its shape. Thank you, Price. Your discretion, as always, is appreciated. Send the final invoice. With a curt nod, the ghost departed, leaving her alone with the drive. She slid it into her machine, the software, whirring the only sound in her cavernous office. She bypassed the main folder. The business treachery could wait, and went straight to the supplementary file labeled personal. It was a cold clinical catalog of deceit. The first few images were mundane. Gavin entering a luxury hotel downtown at 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. A restaurant receipt for two charged to a corporate card under false name. Then the photos became less ambiguous. A woman, a brunette lobbyist Valeria recognized, laughing as Gavin whispered in her ear, his hand possessively on her waist. Another, a young intern from his own PR firm, slipping out of a downtown condo building at dawn. Valeria's lip curled and distasted. It was sordid, predictable. Gavin's charm was a cheap veneer over core of entitlement. She clicked through the evidence with detached disgust, text message logs filled with juvenile innuendo, hotel booking. Confirmations, more photos, a red-headed attorney, a blonde socialite. Her initial reaction was purely professional. This was leverage, nuclear leverage. The board of Ethereum stuffed with old money moralists would eat him alive. His engagement to Lila Hart, the darling of the society pages, would become a mockery. The PR fallout would be catastrophic for his company. It was better than she could have possibly hoped for. She was mentally drafting the press release in her head. The cold, precise language she would use to express her profound disappointment in a competitor's lack of character when she opened the final subfolder. It was a series of photos taken at a charity event she herself had attended. There was Lila, resplendent in a sapphire blue gown, her smile radiant as she looked up at Gavin, her hand resting gently on his arm. She was the picture of devotion, of unwavering trust. The photographer had caught her in a moment of unguarded affection, her entire being focused on him, believing herself to be the center of his world. The next photo was a timestamp shot from less than an hour later, the same event. Gavin was in a shadowy alcove off the main balcony, locked in a passionate embrace with the event's married caterer. Valeria's breath hitched. She stared at the two images side by side on her vast high-resolution monitor. On the left, Lila's luminous, trusting love. On the right, the brutal, ugly truth of its repayment. The professional calculus, the cold satisfaction of securing a weapon, evaporated. It was incinerated by a sudden volcanic surge of an emotion so foreign and powerful, it left her dizzy, pure, unadulterated fury. It wasn't the cool, strategic anger of a rival thwarted. This was personal, white-hot, and utterly illogical. Her hands, usually so steady, clenched into fists on the glass desk, her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, angry rhythm. How dare he? How dare this vain, pining, hollow man be handed a treasure like Lila and treat it with such grotesque carelessness? How dare he smirkingly stand beside that kind of a brilliance and radiance, all while his hands were grubbing in the dirt? He wasn't just a business rival. He was a Philistine defacing a masterpiece, a fool shattering a diamond because he was too stupid to recognize its value. Her mind flashed to Lila's intelligent eyes in the art gallery, calling her efficiency. Beautiful, she thought of that quiet strength, the sharp mind playing the supportive role with such grace. Lila wasn't a fool. She was a woman operating with integrity Gavin couldn't even comprehend. She was living in good faith in a den of wolves, and the alpha wolf she trusted was leading the pack to devour her. The ice in Valeria's veins didn't melt. It flash froze into something harder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. This was no longer about market share or corporate dominance. This was about justice. She would not let this stand. She would not allow Lila Hart to be publicly humiliated, to have her heart and her trust ground into dust by a man who wasn't fit to polish her shoes. Lila deserved the truth. She deserved to see the monster for what he was before he could do any more damage. Valeria leaned back in her chair, the leather groaning softly. The city lights began to twinkle below, a galaxy of ambition and sin. She knew what she had to do. The plan began to form in her mind, not as a business strategy, but as a crusade. She would tell Lila everything. She would present the evidence not as a weapon for corporate war, but as a key to a prison cell. And then with Lila by her side, knowing the truth, then she would destroy Gavin Mercer. Not just in business, but utterly and completely. She would dismantle his empire, his reputation, and his smug sense of invincibility piece by piece. Part 3, Coffee and Cracks. The plan was set. For 3 days, Valeria's team had discreetly tracked Lila's routine. It was a model of predictable elegance. A 7:15 a.m. arrival at her Pilates studio, a 9 a.m. appearance at the nonprofit foundation she ran, lunches at a rotating selection of health-conscious cafes. Valeria selected the venue with the same strategic care she would emerge in negotiation. The Gilded Bean, a quiet, opulent coffee house known for its privacy, its exquisite pervers, and its deep velvet upholstered booze that swallowed sound. And prying eyes. Valeria arrived first, a queen securing her territory. She chose a booth in the very back, shrouded in shadow despite the mid-morning sun filtering through the leaded glass windows. She ordered a black Ethiopian coffee, her posture ramrod straight, her attached case placed on the seat beside her. Inside was a tablet, the contents of which were about to detonate a life. She saw Lila before Lila saw her. She was a vision in a cream-colored trench coat, her blonde hair a soft cascade over her shoulders, her expression one of pleasant, distracted thought as she pushed open the heavy oak door. She was checking her phone, a small smile on her lips, a text from him, no doubt. The sight of that innocent happiness sent a fresh, sharp pang of that unfamiliar protectiveness through Valeria's chest. It was immediately followed by a cold wave of resolve. She would be the architect of this ruin because it was a necessary demolition. A condemned building had to be torn down before a new one could be built. Valeria lifted a hand, a minimal, elegant gesture. Lila's eyes found her, and a flicker of surprise crossed her features, quickly smoothed into polite recognition. She glided over, the scent of jasmine and orange blossom trailing in her wake. "Valeria, this is a surprise," Lila said, her voice melodic. "I didn't take you for a coffee shop lounger." "Even tyrants need caffeine, Lila," Valeria replied, her tone dry but not unkind. She gestured to the opposite seat. "Please join me. I was hoping to bend your ear for a moment on a philanthropic matter. Your foundation's work with urban tech initiatives is impressive. I find myself interested." It was a perfect lie, appealing to Lila's professional passion, flattering her intellect and framing it as a business discussion. Valeria watched the calculation in Lila's eyes. Slight confusion, then professional interest, then acceptance. She was too well-mannered to refuse. "Of course," Lila said, sliding into the plush velvet booth. She shrugged off her trench coat, revealing a simple but exquisitely cut silk blouse. She ordered a chamomile tea with honey, a choice so inherently Lila that Valeria almost smiled. They made small talk for precisely 5 minutes. Valeria asked pointed, intelligent questions about grant allocation and public-private partnerships. Lila answered with warmth and sharp insight, her hands moving gracefully as she spoke. Valeria found herself genuinely captivated, the mission momentarily forgotten, in the pleasure of engaging with a mind so bright and unpretentious. But the tablet in the attached case was a cold, heavy weight. The clock was ticking. Valeria took a sip of her coffee, the bitterness a bracing jolt. "Lila," she began, her voice lowering, losing its business edge and gaining a new grave softness. "I must confess the philanthropic angle was a pretense, a necessary one to get you here." Lila's teacup halted midway to her lips. The pleasant curiosity on her face tightened into weariness. "Oh, what I have to discuss is deeply personal and profoundly difficult." Valeria held her gaze, allowing the icy shield of her demeanor to thaw just enough to reveal the sincere concern beneath. "It concerns Gavin." Lila's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. The weariness was now edged with defensiveness. "My fiancé say, Aura, I'm not sure what business of yours." It became my business when his actions threatened to spill over and damage people I respect, Valeria interjected smoothly, her voice a low, compelling murmur. She leaned forward, closing the intimate space between them. I need you to understand that what I am about to show you comes not from a place of malice, but from a belief that you have a right to know, that you deserve to know. She opened the attached case and slid the tablet across the table. The screen was dark. I engaged in some corporate due diligence. My investigators found more than they bargained for. This is a curated file. I've removed anything salacious or unnecessarily graphic. What remains is irrefutable. Lila stared at the tablet as if it were a venomous snake. Her hand, which had been so steady, began to tremble slightly. She looked from the device to Valeria's deadly serious face, her own draining of color. The cozy, aromatic warmth of the cafe seemed to drain away, replaced by a wintry void. What is this, Valeria? She whispered, her voice thin, the truth. I'm so very sorry that it falls to me to show you. With a hesitant, dread-filled motion, Lila lifted the tablet. Her finger hovered over the power button. She drew a quick, shaking breath, as if bracing for a blow, and pressed it. The screen flared awake. Valeria had authored the presentation. Herself. It was clinical mercilessly so. No music, no theatrical flourish, only dates, times, places, and proof. The opening image was a side-by-side pull from the charity gala. The ballroom's mirrored walls returned the glitter as if nothing. Private could matter. Captions sat beneath the images like scalpel lines, neat, unemotional. Final reducing romance to metadata and alibis to timestamps. A cool ledger of harm that did not need music or narration to be believed. Even the cursor blinked like a metronome, indifferent to Lila's breath there. Lila at 8:04 p.m., looking at Gavin with unguarded devotion. Gavin at 8:47 p.m., in the alcove with a caterer. A small choked sound slipped from Lila's mouth. It was air being forced out of a punctured lung. Her eyes went wide, unbelieving. She scanned the text beneath the photos, the timestamps, the identification of the woman. Her knuckles whitened around the tablet. This is a mistake, she breathed, her voice trembling. Photos can be doctored. This is some twisted game you're playing because you despise him. Keep going, Valeria said, her voice gentle but inexorable. Lila swiped to the next frame, a restaurant receipt dinner for two, a corporate card number. Valeria had highlighted one of Gavin's shadow accounts. The date was a week after he and Lila had marked their 6-month anniversary with a romantic weekend away. Another swipe, Gavin entering a hotel, 2:17 p.m. a Tuesday. Another, the brunette lobbyist leaving the same hotel, 4:02 p.m. another, text messages crass, juvenile, unmistakably in Gavin's idiom, another and another. Lila's breathing grew ragged, shallow. She wasn't arguing anymore. She was simply absorbing the blows. Each artifact a hammer strike, chipping at the foundation of her world. The beautiful guilt life she believed she was building revealed itself as a stage set, decaying from the inside out. Tears rose in her magnificent eyes, not yet falling, but pooling, turning the blue to a swim of agony so profound it was almost beautiful. She tried to mask it, to cling to the poise that was her armor, pressing her lips into a tight, bloodless line. But one tear escaped, tracing a hot, perfect line down her cheek. She wiped it away with an angry, jerking motion, as if ashamed of its betrayal. Why? The word was a broken whisper ripped from someplace deep within. She wasn't asking Valeria. She was asking the ghost of the man she thought she loved. Why would he? How could he? Her composure fractured. The tears came then, not as a flood, but as a silent, relentless river. She didn't sob. She wept quietly, shoulders shaking, her face a mask of bewildered grief. She looked suddenly small, fragile in her expensive silk blouse, hunched over. The tablet that had just erased her future. Valeria's own carefully built walls flexed under the strain. The sight of this radiant woman, brought low by a fool's betrayal, lit a fury so pure it felt like heat in her veins. She slid around the booth without a second thought, and sat beside Lila, not touching, offering presence as a bulwark against the crushing isolation of betrayal. "Look at me, Lila," Valeria said, her voice low and intent. Lila slowly, helplessly, lifted her tear-streaked face. The pain in her eyes was a physical thing. "He is trash," Valeria said, the words absolute, leaving no room for debate. "You are a goddess. You are brilliance, grace, light. You stood beside trash and tried to build a palace. But trash doesn't belong in palaces. It belongs in the gutter it came from." The metaphor, stark and brutal, seemed to cut through the fog of Lila's grief. A spark caught in the depths of her pain, not just hurt, but a dawning righteous anger. Her jaw firmed. Valeria pressed the advantage, her voice dropping to a whisper meant only for Lila. "This pain he's handed you is a debt in debts," she said, her eyes glinting with a cold promise fire. "Can be collected." She set a crisp, monogrammed handkerchief on the table by Lila's hand. "When the shock dulls, when grief hardens into something steadier, come find me. We'll discuss terms of repayment." Valeria rose, leaving the tablet. She placed a 50 on the table to cover the untouched drinks. She didn't look back. She walked out of the Gilded Bean, leaving Lila alone in the velvet dark booth with the ruins of her life and the first quiet promise of a reckoning. Part 4. Fire Behind the Veil. The week after the meeting at the Gilded Bean was the longest of Lila's life. It moved in a haze of exquisite, soul-sick agony, a performance worthy of a stage she now knew was worm-rotten. She moved through, her world like a ghost, wearing the skin of who she'd been. She smiled, it was her most practiced weapon, and wielded it with cold precision. She smiled at Gavin over breakfast, her heart a cold, hard stone as he chattered about a hostile takeover he was engineering. She smiled and squeezed his hand, feeling the lie of his skin against hers, imagining the hands that had touched so. "Many others. You're quiet lately, darling," he remarked one evening, peering at her over the rim of his whiskey glass. "Not getting cold feet, are you?" He said it with a smug, condescending chuckle, so utterly certain of her devotion. The smile she gave him then was so bright, it felt like it would crack her face. "Never," she lied, her voice sweet as poison. "I was just thinking about the floral arrangements, paillon or gardenias for the centerpieces. I want everything to be perfect." She fed his ego, gave him the mundane, bright taupe concerns he expected. It was the perfect camouflage. Her silence was not cold feet. It was the quiet, focused arming of a bomb. Every touch was a fresh betrayal. When he kissed her cheek, she felt the phantom lips of the caterer, the lobbyist, the intern. When he held her hand at a fundraiser, her skin crawled. She began to notice things she'd woefully ignored before. The way his charm could turn oily, the possessive glint in his eye that wasn't love but ownership, the casual dismissiveness he showed to anyone he deemed beneath him. Valeria's words echoed in her mind, a constant clarifying mantra. Trash doesn't belong in palaces. She was a vessel filled to the brim with grief, but beneath it, a new, more potent emotion was brewing, a pure, undiluted rage. It was a cold fire in her veins, and it needed an outlet. It needed a purpose. The charade became unbearable. The weight of his hand on the small of her back at a gallery opening felt like a brand of humiliation. That night, alone in her pristine, silent apartment, she finally broke. Not into tears, she was done with tears, but into a silent, shaking fury. She paced her living room, Valeria's monogrammed handkerchief clutched in her fist. The elegant initials, a tangible promise of something more than just pain. She didn't hesitate. She found the business card Valeria had subtly left beside the tablet. Thick ivory stock embossed with nothing but a name and a private cell number. Her fingers trembled, but not with uncertainty, with anticipation. The phone rang only once. Valeria Knox. The voice was its usual call, composed contralto. It was the voice of a woman who had never had her world shattered. "It's Lila." Her own voice was rough, stripped raw. "I'm Stevie." There was the briefest pause on the other end, a silent acknowledgement of the seismic shift in those two words. "My office now." Valeria's corporate fortress was eerily silent at night, a monument to power and money. The receptionist was gone. The halls were dark, lit only by emergency lighting that glinted off the polished floors. Lila's heels clicked a sharp, angry staccato rhythm that seemed to announce her arrival. Here I come. Valeria's office door was ajar. Lila pushed it open. Valeria stood before the wall of windows, a silhouette against the city's glittering tapestry. She turned, and in the dim light, her features were all sharp angles and shadows, her eyes gleaming with an unnerving intensity. She was holding 2 crystal tumblers of amber liquid. She offered one to Lila. "Whiskey, you look like you need it." Lila took the glass, her fingers brushing Valeria. A spark, hot and sharp, seemed to jump between them. She didn't sip it. She threw it back, the liquor burning a path of fire down her throat, matching the inferno in her soul. She slammed the empty glass down on the immense glass desk. "I want to bury him," she said, her voice low and vibrating with a fury so potent it seemed to chill the air in the room. "I don't just want to leave him. I don't want a quiet scandal. I want to orchestrate his ruin. I want to humiliate him. I want to take everything he cares about, his reputation, his business, his pathetic pride, and grind it into dust so fine the wind will blow it away. I want him to feel a fraction of the devastation he gave me. I want to destroy him in a way he will never ever recover from." She was breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling, her blonde hair loose and slightly wild around her shoulders. She had never spoken words so venomous, so full of hate. It was liberating. Valeria's lips, usually set in a severe line, curved into a slow, predatory smile. It was a terrifying and magnificent sight. She looked like a wolf that had just found its favorite hunt. "Good," she purred, her voice a low thrum of pleasure. "I was hoping you'd say that." She finished her own whiskey and placed the glass down with a deliberate click. "I have a plan. It's audacious. It's utterly insane, and it will eviscerate him." "Tell me," Lila demanded, her eyes blazing. Valeria stepped closer, closing the distance between them. The air crackled. "The wedding, you will go through with it. You will be the perfect blushing bride. You will stand beside him at the altar in front of everyone he's ever wanted to impress. His investors, his board, his society friends, the press." Lila's breath hitched. The thought was apparent. "What?" "Wait," Valeria commanded, her gaze locking with Lila's, holding her captive. "You let him think his won. You let him stand there, smug and victorious, on the precipice of having it all. And then just as he's about to say his vows, you stop it." She began to pace, a panther outlining its strategy. "You reveal everything calmly, coldly. You, the wronged woman, dignified and devastating. You have the evidence ready, a projector perhaps. Show his face to the entire world, not as a titan of industry, but as a pathetic, cheating worm." Lila could see it. The gasps, the horror on the guests' faces, the look of utter shock and humiliation. On Gavin's, the image was so powerfully appealing it made her dizzy. And then Lila whispered, caught in the terrifying, beautiful web. Valeria was spinning. Valeria stopped pacing and turned to face her fully. Her expression was utterly serious, her winter frost eyes burning with a strange, fervent light. And then, Valeria said, her voice dropping to an intimate, world-altering murmur, "I will stand up. I will walk to the altar. And I will take your hand." Lila's mind went blank. "What?" Valeria took another step, so close now that Lila could smell her perfume. Something dark and exotic, like oudwood and night blooming. "Flowers. And I will propose," Valeria continued, her gaze unwavering, "that we finish the ceremony, you and I." The world tilted on its axis. Lila stared at her, utterly flawed. The sheer, breathtaking insanity of it, the audacity. "You're insane," she breathed, taking a stumbling step back. That's monstrous. A publicity stunt." "You want to use my humiliation to do what?" "Shock the world. Steal his headline." No. The word was sharp, final. Valeria closed the distance again, her intensity overwhelming. "It's the final absolute. Humiliation. He loses his wife, his reputation, and his victory, all to his greatest business rival, a woman. It's a checkmate he will never ever live down." And for us, her voice softened just a fraction. A business arrangement, a merger, a merger. Lila repeated, numb with disbelief. 2 years, Valeria stated, her tone becoming pragmatic, though her eyes still burned. A 2-year marriage contract. Number. Prenuptial agreement. My assets, my company, half of it is yours from day one. A show of absolute trust you will want for nothing. In return, you help me run my empire. Your mind is wasted on charity galas. I want it in my boardroom. After 2 years, we dissolve the marriage amicably, and you walk away an obscenely wealthy, powerful woman in your own right, free of him forever. Lila's mind was reeling, trying to process the legal, social, and personal ramifications. It was the most outlandish, dangerous proposition she had ever heard. And what about the rest of it? She asked, her voice hushed. The marriage, you and... you don't even date. Valeria finished for her, a faint knowing smile touching her lips. No, I don't. I've never had the time or the inclination for the fast of dating. My life is my company. She held Lila's gaze, and for the first time, Lila saw a crack in the perfect icy armor, a glimpse of something raw and startlingly sincere. But I am not blind, Lila, and I am not made of stone. I won't touch you without your express invitation. You have my word. You will have your own room, your own space. The world will see a powerful union. What happens in private will be entirely up to you. The offer hung in the air between them, glittering and dangerous and utterly revolutionary. It wasn't just revenge. It was an escape hatch. It was power. It was a partnership. And buried beneath the ruthless logic of the deal, Lila saw it, a glimmer of truth in Valeria's icy eyes. A flicker of something that looked an awful lot like not just admiration, but genuine want. It was the craziest thing she had ever heard. And looking at the fierce, brilliant, terrifyingly sincere woman in front of her, it was also the most tempting. Part 5. Dangerous allies. The cadence of their days was rewritten. The clandestine meetings became their new anchor, a secret, held at the heart of a city that only thought it knew them. They were no longer merely a wronged woman and a vengeful patron. They were co-conspirators, architects of a ruin. Their war room was a carousel of locations chosen for anonymity and clean acoustics. A private booth at the back of a members only. Library club, a soundproofed conference room in Valeria's tower after hours. And once the secluded greenhouse atop Valeria's penthouse, ringed by the quiet, fragrant humidity of orchids. The first sessions were all business, a clinical dissection of the coming spectacle. Valeria, ever the strategist, brought flowcharts and timelines. A guest list is our battlefield, Valeria declared, sliding a printed spreadsheet across the polished teak table of the club. She'd marked names in different colors, yellow for his allies. They must witness his humiliation firsthand. Green for neutrals. Their outrage will power the court of public opinion. Red for your true friends. We seat them nearer. The front for immediate support. Lila lifted the sheet, brows arched. She tapped a name shaded blue. And him? Valeria's mouth twitched. Editor of the city's biggest gossip site. He gets a prime seat. Think of him as our megaphone. Lila let out a startled, genuine laugh. The sound seemed to surprise them both. You're terrifyingly good at this. I'm good at everything I do, Lila, Valeria replied. There was no arrogance in it, only a flat statement of fact. She gestured toward the list. Who handled floral? We'll pay them triple to be on standby to whisk away any obstructive centerpieces before the reveal. It was during these logistics deep dives that Lila's keen intellect began to blaze, moving beyond the role of a grieved fiancé into that of a full partner. The projector, she said one afternoon, tapping her pen against her lip. We can't trust the venue Wi-Fi. He may have a plan on staff who could sabotage it. We need a standalone hardwired system and a backup drive. I know a guy. Valeria studied her, a fresh admiration in her gaze. See? Wasted on galas. You should have run Black Ops. I run a nonprofit, Lila deadpanned. It's basically the same thing, fewer explosions, more grant proposals. A smirk touched Valeria's lips. We'll see about the explosions. As the days stretched into a week, then 2, The rigid agenda of their meetings began to soften at the edges. The machinery of ruin was meticulously planned. What remained was the space between. One afternoon, after finalizing the order of evidence to present, start with the charity gala photos. The juxtaposition is narratively potent, Lila insisted, and Valeria nodded. A lull settled. Valeria stood staring at the skyline, a faint line of tension between her brows. Long day? Lila asked, sipping tea. She'd learned Valeria took her coffee black as sin, but would sometimes accept an Earl Grey if Lila brewed it. Valeria sighed a rare, unguarded sound. One of my VPs is pushing a merger that's idiotic on its face. He's either blindingly foolish or being leaned down by a competitor. Which? Lila asked. The former, I suspect. He's arguing sentiment, not data. Infuriating. Lila leaned back, thoughtful. Harold Pennington Balding has a thing for vintage pens. Valeria turned, surprised. You know him? He's on the Children's Hospital Foundation board with me, Lila said. He isn't dumb. His daughter's getting married to the son of the CEO of the firm you're trying to merge with. Not sentiment nepotism. He's courting his future in-laws. Valeria stared, utterly silent for a full 10 seconds. Then a slow, devastating smile unfurled across her face. You are a treasure trove, Lila Hart. I pay attention, Lila said with a modest shrug, glowing under the intensity of Valeria's praise. The banter began soon after a verbal dance, a testing of borders. Valeria, reviewing Lila's immaculate notes, murmured, Your handwriting is unexpectedly fierce, Angel, all those sharp, precise angles. I expected loops and hearts over the eyes. Lila, without glancing up from her tablet, shot back, and I expected a tyrant's scrawl, bluster, and chaos. Yet yours is practically typeset. Did you sell your soul for perfect penmanship too? Or only for the company? Valeria's laugh was a low, rich ripple that seemed to vibrate through the room. The soul was part of the package deal, I'm afraid. The nickname stuck. Valeria called her Angel in a teasing, proprietary tone that made Lila's stomach flip. Lila dubbed Valeria her ruthless soul seller, which Valeria accepted with a proud tilt of her chin. The physical space between them began to narrow. They leaned too close over a single brief, their shoulders brushing. Valeria would reach for a pen as Lila did, fingers touching, the contact sending a jolt that held them both still a fraction of a second too long before they withdrew. Their eyes would meet and linger over a coffee cup's rim, the air between them thickening, charged with unspoken questions. Their plans grew teeth and timelines, their glances meanings. Silence acquired a vocabulary, the pause before a shared. Login, the breath held while a file rendered, the measured exhale when a risk aligned with reward. In the mirrored hush of elevators, reflections offered deniability, yet neither looked away. When rain rattled the greenhouse glass, orchids bowed like discreet witnesses. Strategy bled into ritual, tea into confessions, data into trust. By the time the gustless locked, neither could pretend this alliance lived only on paper. One evening, as Lila was packing up her things, she asked a question that had been nagging at her. All this talk of our marriage, she began, her tone light, though her heart was hammering. You've never dated at all? I find that hard to believe. She gestured vaguely at all of Valeria, powerful and beautiful in the twilight glow of the office. Valeria didn't look up from locking her desk drawer. I find the entire ritual tedious. The pretending, the small talk, the expectation to be softer, less than what I am. Men are either intimidated or they see me as a conquest to be. Both are exhaustingly boring. And women, Lila asked softly, the question hanging in the air. Valeria finally looked at her, her gaze unreadable. The opportunity never presented itself in a way that interested me. The raw, unvarnished honesty of it struck Lila, this woman, who commanded armies of employees and shaped markets, was utterly inexperienced in the messy world of the heart. It wasn't a weakness. It was a shocking vulnerability that made her seem more powerful, not less. She had chosen a life of the mind, of pure ambition, and had never encountered anything or anyone compelling enough to make her change course, until Now, you waited this long, Lila said, her voice barely a whisper for a revenge plot with a woman you barely know. Valeria took a step closer. The usual icy restraint in her eyes had melted, replaced by a warmth so deep and unexpected it stole the air from Lila's lungs. The predatory CEO was gone. In her place was just a woman laying herself bare with a terrifying sincerity. No, Valeria said, her voice hushed and intimate in the quiet room. I think I was just waiting for you. The words hung in the space between them, simple and world-shattering. It was no longer about the plan or the revenge or the merger. It was about this magnetic pole, this electric current that had been building since the art gallery acknowledged at last. Lila could only stare, her carefully constructed world tilting once again, not toward ruin, but toward something entirely new and terrifyingly bright. Part 6. The tension builds. The air in Valeria's private study had become a living thing, thick and heavy with unspoken words and uncharted desire. It was their new preferred meeting place, a room that smelled of old leather, fine whiskey, and the faint, crisp scent of Valeria's perfume. It felt less like a corporate space and more like a den, intimate and insulated from the world they were preparing to detonate. Their conversations were still ostensibly about the plan. Spreadsheets were open on tablets. Timelines were scrutinized, but the focus had become porous. They were sitting on the same side of her vast mahogany desk, shoulders almost touching as they reviewed the final seating chart. Lila was pointing out a potential issue with sightlines. If Mrs. Whitaker sits here, her hat will block the view of the screen for the entire third row. It's a monstrosity of lace and feathers. We need to move her. Valeria leaned in closer to see her temple nearly brushing Lila's hair, noted, vanish her to the back. I never liked her anyway. She once tried to sell me a timeshare at a funeral. Lila snorted a most you and Lila-like sound that made Valeria's lips quirk into a smile. You're joking. I never joke about timeshares. Angel, they're a blight on humanity. Valeria's voice was a low murmur, her attention seemingly on the chart, but her gaze flickered to the side, taking in the way the lamplight gilded Lila's profile. The casual endearment, once teasing, now landed with the weight of a caress. Lila felt a flush of warmth spread from her chest to the tips of her ears. She shifted slightly, and her knee pressed against Valeria's under the desk. Neither of them moved away. The contact was a brand, a simple fleeting touch of wool skirt against tailored trouser leg, and yet it seemed to short-circuit Lila's higher brain functions. She lost her train of thought entirely, the names on the chart blurring into meaningless symbols. All she could feel was the solid, warm line of Valeria's leg against hers. Valeria, for her part, went perfectly still. The ever-present hum of her calculating mind went silent. Her eyes remained fixed on the spreadsheet, but she made no move to scroll, to speak, to breathe. It was as if her entire universe had narrowed to that single point of contact. The silence stretched, becoming a taut wire thrumming between them. It was Lila who finally broke it, her voice slightly breathless. For part 2, subscribe to our channel and ring the bell.